Wish you a great day and very good afternoon to you all. I'm Anuruddha Gamage, Executive Council Member of Justica and Chairman of Justica Institute of Management. We as Japan Sri Lanka Technical and Cultural Association Justica being one of the most performing AOTS Japan alumni in the globe. And Justica Institute of Management, JIM, as Justica's training arm, would like to warmly welcome you all to the second webinar session on the day of 24th May 2020, 4 p.m. local time here. For our overseas friends from AOTS alumni fraternity who have joined today with us, we would like to warmly welcome you. I go on. The theme of our webinar series is Accept the Shake-Up, Dealing with the Change, to reframe your thoughts to grow vigorously by use of best lessons learned. This is to drive our strategy on assisting, guiding, and influencing all our regular and non-conventional clients, individuals, corporates who have been our strength for last few decades in our Justica success story. Today's topic is boundless opportunities in agriculture during post-COVID-19. Dig it, cultivate it, harvest it. The ways and means of capitalizing emerging opportunities in agriculture, agro-based food production, and virgin market trends. Our aim today is to ensure that we positively engage professionals and decision makers in meaningful dialogue about matters that affect us all in respect of new trends in agriculture, innovative food production, and food value chain. Of course, our aim today is to strategize to convert the society towards think tank for food as a dynamic paradigm shift in the country's big picture of sustainable development. To grace this timely and appropriate topic today with us, we have well-experienced, eminent panel of highly recognized panelists from Sri Lanka, including a Sri Lankan professional who is based in African continent. And they are here with us to share their extreme experiences, new knowledge, and applicability of such experience and knowledge in real world of work during post-COVID period, which we believe will add value to you and your organizations to have a speedy recovery during post-COVID period. Today we have with us Senior Professor Buddhi Marabe, former Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, President, Weed Science Society of Sri Lanka, Chairman, National Invasive Species Specialist Group, Minister of Environment, Member, National Experts Committee on Climate Change Adaptation. Also, we have with us today Dr. Ilmi G.N. Hebajulike. She is the Additional Director General R&D, Senior Deputy Director, Food Technology Section of Industrial Technological Institute, ITI, Sri Lanka. Also, Mr. Subhash Abevikrama with us today. He is the Director Chief Operating Officer, Sunbird Bioenergy Sierra Leone Limited. He is a former Director of Human Rights Organization as well. To lead the panel through this most needed topic today, we have one of the most senior, well-experienced, and another highly recognized professional in Sri Lanka. He's Mr. Atul Edirisinghe. He's a managing partner, Strategic Management Alliance promoting trade and investment between Japanese and Sri Lankan companies. And also he's the director of Hirohama Ceylon Limited and past president and trustee of Justica. To visualize the concept, we have Mr. Niroshi Silla with me today as he's the Assistant Secretary and Executive Council member of Justica. Today he's the co-host. And also Mr. Chetana Kahandugoda, Executive member of Justica as the producer. And also Ms. Shami Vikramaratne is here with me. She is the Assistant Manager, Training and Development, Justica, and as the co-producer. Without taking your valuable time furthermore, I will hand over the baton to Mr. Atul Edirisinghe to take the journey with the topic. Over to Mr. Edirisinghe. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuruddha, for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you. You will agree the way forward in agriculture is a very timely topic today. When we were locked down in our homes, we saw on one hand shortages of food in supply chains, whereas fruits and vegetables were mounting at the farmers' yards. In this new normal, can we not invest and create better solutions to link farmers, middlemen, wholesale channels, and economic centers that will eventually benefit the farmers and the consumers? We will discuss about e-commerce and cold chain partnerships, pre-harvest challenges and post-harvest losses, Then we'll go into local plant breeding opportunities and importing high quality seeds and planting material. Bee onions, you know very well, about a few months ago, there was acute shortage of bee onions when India stopped exports of bee onions. We can encounter similar situation in time to come. If that happens, from where do we get our potatoes, dry chilies, big onions, and mung beans? Are there opportunities in this? In countries like Japan, there is a demand for immune boosters such as cinnamon, turmeric, garlic, moringa, and ginger. Can we add value to these items? Home garden is a very popular topic among housewives today. Now, how about nucleus farming? Arrangements between buyers and farmers, big and small. Smart farming concepts leveraging advanced ICT, big data, the cloud, the IoT, the blockchain for traceability. Our panel of experts will agree temperature increase of 2 degrees centigrade could reduce agricultural output by 15% with current farming practices, whereas FAO estimates 60% more food is needed by 2050. Then, ladies and gentlemen, the Japanese companies who are engaged in agri-processing in China are pulling out from China. They are taking the advantage of the stimulus package offered by the Japanese Prime Minister. And these companies are looking at countries who will have agricultural produce so that they can process and take it back to their country. So isn't this an opportunity where our authorities should take lead and see to what extent we can entice these Japanese investors? Then, ladies and gentlemen, there are challenges too. Some challenges can create opportunities for investment. Challenges in last minute delivery, B2C, can we not invest in that? The post-harvest losses, approximately 40% of harvest is lost. Are there opportunities in remedying that situation? Then floods, rainfall, and poor water management. Whereas we have thousands of tanks that are neglected. Can we not collect rainwater and use for our agriculture activities? Then, of course, finally, the government red tape in land release. This is an issue which needs attention by the authorities. Now, I will discuss some of these opportunities with our panel of experts, and I'm sure they will give you advice on this. Thank you. To start with, crop season is now begun. Is there a quick fix to prevent the issues we had in the recent past? Over to you, Professor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Justika, for bringing me in to this very important webinar. Atula, you pointed out some important points with respect to the problems that we face at this particular stage. But I will add a little bit more to that. But the important thing to remember once again, all these problems that we face right now in the field of agriculture, be it crop or animal sectors, they are perennial in nature. It doesn't mean COVID-19 brought these things. COVID-19 actually brought some of these things to the surface to understand, to alert us, saying that we cannot go on like this. So that's the important message that we get out of COVID-19. If you look at the perennial problems that we have been discussing for quite a long period of time, high cost of production, labor costs, and the cost of new technology, for example. Then we spoke of fluctuations in market prices with a lot of inefficiency in the market channels, and also about low farm gate prices. We have been talking about this, trying to give solutions for years right now, but still the problem prevails. And unavailability of agricultural inputs on time. If any one of you all watch Sri Lankan television station for the last 2 days, you must have seen the problems that we face with respect to bee onion seed availability, with respect to fertilizer availability, and so on. We'll talk about those things. And then seasonal drugs in production. We always talk about value addition, new technologies coming in, and so on. So the interesting part of for us Sri Lankans, there is seasonal glut in production, and there's also a seasonal discussion in value addition. So both become seasonal, very unfortunately, but problems continue. And more importantly, as Atula said a little while ago, the food distribution issues has been an eternal problem. But interesting, despite all these things, as Atula said, we have started the Yala season and we are talking about a new normal. This new normal, we still do not know, but whatever the new normal is going to be, we have to make sure that at least some of the perennial problems will be no more in this new normal. That's something that all of us will have to create together. That's the important part. So the COVID-19 have shown us that we are not prepared. So let's try to prepare, at least taking lesson from that point onwards. Well, looking at the season that is ongoing, Atula, there are some good things that happened just before the lockdown. That was on 18th March 2020. The good things were that majority of the Maha harvest, people were able to get it down. People were able to harvest their Maha season crops. And the Department of Agriculture has already planned their cultivating seasons, what to cultivate, how much to cultivate, and so on. Those plans were in place. They didn't come up just because of COVID-19. They were there a few months ago. So that was a plus point that we had. Despite all these things happening, we could go ahead with the cultivation programs and so on. And on top of that, our private sector, government sector, and the farming community together, we had adequate seeds and planting materials to start on cultivation in Yala season. Of course, there were a few problems, like in the case of bee onion seeds, where majority of the seed input is coming from India. We know the problems that those are there. We'll discuss later once again. And then there were a few problems in vegetable harvesting also at the initial stages. Though the cereals were harvested, vegetable took a bit of a long period of time, and there was the labor scarcity, coupled with curfew, lockdown, blocking of transportation, and so on. Well, anyway, there were plus points and negatives. And while the Yala season started and the COVID-19 came into effect, and we started feeling the pressure, the government of Sri Lanka, the Department of Agriculture, and many other line agencies, the task forces established by the government, they also took certain action to fix certain problems that were prevailing in the system, at least to make sure there will be short-term impacts, short-term benefits, and so on. Now, for example, they were trying to fix the food distribution issues, despite there is curfew, despite there is lockdown, despite there is closure of dedicated economic centers, and more importantly, private sector failing to cope up. There were well-known private sector agencies who were in the food distribution system, but they could not cope up with such a magnitude, such a crisis at this level of magnitude, and supply the food correctly to the end users. Those were problems. But the government of Sri Lanka, got the upper hand and brought in local governments into the picture, brought in armed forces into the picture to purchase the material and to distribute it. Well, I'm not in favor of bringing in armed forces every time to the normal day-to-day operations, but this is a crisis scenario. We have to understand that part. And promoting online home delivery systems, it's heartening to see government agencies like CWE, collaborating and getting in partnership into a private agency to make sure food is delivered. Material is delivered to the home front. But then those were all good points. But the important thing is there were bad points as well. We have still failed to fix. For example, the fertilizer issue. Fertilizer, there's delay in imports and delay in distribution. Even the fertilizer that came in, of course, we had problems of unloading the consignments because of lack of labor. But still, the fertilizer has failed to reach the farming community. The paddy fertilizer, when you look at the 100% subsidized fertilizer, has reached the farming community to a certain level, but not the others. We see everything, the problem, every time the problem is arising on TV, people are complaining, blaming, but then there is a problem that we have to fix. We have to make sure the mechanism is streamlined, at least in the future. Well, the pluses once again. There is a food production and productivity enhancement drive, Atula. That's a plus point to us. And there's adequate planting material production that is required for next Maha season. We have to keep that in mind. Yala is ongoing, but if you are not going to be able to produce adequate planting material to support the cultivation in Maha season, which is our major cultivating season, we'll all be in trouble. So to make sure people have now got together to support the Department of Agriculture to provide countries seed material, the required seed material and planting material. And more importantly, going ahead, the government of Sri Lanka recently announced a fixed price scheme for 16 crops. in Yala season. That itself, Atula, give a kind of hope to the farming community. What the farming community has faced in the past every time is that by the time the harvest reaches in, here comes the crops imported from other countries. I will come to those details later, and that the level of motivation is going down dramatically. But here comes some hope. There's a fixed price of 16 crops. There's a soft loan scheme given for 36 crop. Free seed cost being reimbursed up to 0.5 acres, and for the remaining 4.5 acres, the seed cost is reimbursed at a cost of 50% of the cost of production. All those are plus points and fixers that has been to overcome the everlasting problems that we had in the system. And very recently, once again, Atula, there were temporary import restrictions for 3 months imposed by the government. That was on 16th April. But going further, just 2 days ago, effective from yesterday, there was a special commodity levy on imported products which was imposed for 6 months, which is mainly because, of course, we know that there's a foreign exchange issue in this country, but it's also giving some hope for the farmers. So this matches beautifully. It's a rare situation that the cultivation plan is matching with the fiscal policies of the government. So I think it's a big plus point. There's a fixers being done. Mostly are short term, but we have to look into long term. As I told you, if you don't think of Mahaseason from now on, just producing is not going to help. We have to have the seed and plant material of good quality for the next Mahaseason as well. So with that short comment to your question, Atula, I remain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. Are there challenges in food supply chain, Dr. Ilmi? What are your views?
Yes. Thank you for your introduction, Satula, and I'm from Sri Lanka. First of all, I would like to thank Justica for organizing this timely webinar and inviting me to share the experience. We all know that agriculture is changing rapidly in this modern era. Meantime, the global population also rising at an alarming rate. Consumer preferences also change time to time, day by day. Now consumer preferences are shifting more towards maybe organic agriculture. They demand high quality nutritious food, safe and toxin-free commodities with guaranteed traceability. However, FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization statistics indicated that 1/3 of the world food production is lost or wasted annually. So one of the main reasons for these losses is due to the inefficient and insufficient supply chain management. In this context, we need to strengthen the supply chain, assuring that the consumer receive good quality, nutritious food they need in a safe manner. So I like to emphasize few major challenges identified in fish, fruit and vegetable supply chain, where large number of players are involved and also has significant impact on employment and social issues in Sri Lanka. The main challenge I see is the economy of scale of production. So more than 70% of livelihood of Sri Lanka's rural population is dependent on agriculture. They are the people who produce the majority of the nation's requirement of fruits and vegetables. However, the fragmented land holding is the issue. So with these small scale farming units, we cannot guarantee a continuous supply, a good quality produce, and we have to go for organized productions. Anyway, these farmer communities can be nicely fitted into contract grower system or farmer cooperative system. We can ask them to grow common crop and thereby easy to equip them with relevant knowledge, new knowledge, financial management, and also we can share benefits and profits also with these farmers. Some of our supermarket channels and exporters have done this, and their value chain system are now functioning efficiently. The next challenge what I see is the crop selection and crop growing pattern are not aligned with the actual market information or the Department of Agriculture recommendation. Farmers take their own decisions. Sometimes they cultivate the crops what they want, what they think that they can get good return. So this often results poor quality produce, seasonal gluts, and high post-harvest losses, as you earlier mentioned. So one of the best recent example is excess pumpkin production experience in this post-COVID period. So most of the farmers call me and ask whether they can do any value addition to their excess pumpkin harvest. No, they are too late, because if we want to do value addition, we have to plan ahead. We cannot start value addition when there is an excess. So the other challenge is the complexity of the supply chain. So especially the fruit and vegetable supply chain, the perishable supply chain in Sri Lanka is very complicated. And there are many players, intermediate persons, and therefore time consuming. So fresh produce passes through many hands before reaching them to consumers, leading high post-harvest losses. Here again, our exporters and supermarket channels have squeezed their supply chains, limiting to few players such as farmer, maybe collection center, warehouse, and the supermarket. So it is important, the other point is the important to establish innovative packing house and warehouse facilities with automation to strengthen the food supply chain. Because and also logistics and transportation should be improved by facilitating maybe road rails, flight routes, marine, and also road access for perishable supply chain. The other challenge I see is the lack of proper traceability. So now we are in a global village. So the supply chains, in the supply chain, we have to ensure the quality and safety. So introducing good agricultural practices, Sri Lankan GAP or organic farming systems, which guarantee the traceability, are becoming popular in the country now. Thanks for the Department of Agriculture for establishing more than, I think, 500 GAP certified, GAP certified farming units in Sri Lanka within a short period of time. That's a big achievement to the country. Then absence of proper extension service in another problem in our marketing supply chain. We have to have proper extension service to advise our farmers and other players in the supply, not only the farmers, even the distribution agents, we have to give some advice through extension service, the supply chain players. And also we have to give some good practices, how to reduce losses. So those information we have to give to these players. Then we have very good agricultural research stations and universities. They have very good knowledge, but the percolating down to the actual user is very limited. So we can see a gap there. And also large amount of waste created within the supply chain due to high post-harvest. You also clearly mentioned in your introduction that we have around 30 to 40% loss. That is the big challenge we face, and I hope I can discuss this later when we are going on.
Thank you, Dr. Ilmi. Subhash, in Africa, you are much ahead of high-tech farming. Can you share your experience? Also, can it be an investment opportunity for Sri Lanka? Over to you.
Thanks, Atula, and I want to all. I'm really excited to join this timely important webinar organized by Justica. Let me give you a heads up on Africa first. Out of 54 countries, six of them were amongst top 10 fastest developing economies of the world in pre-COVID era. Others lagged behind mainly because of back-to-back conflicts, human resources, and mainly because of mismanagement of lands. Nevertheless, if you consider the mineral values, they say Africa is the richest continent in the world. Africa is $2.6 trillion economy. Continent imports around 550 billion worth of items, including 10 billion worth of rice per year, and about 300 billion worth of goods are exported every year. As the gap of trade is huge at about $250 billion, most countries here have now realized the importance of going for kind of nationalistic economy, as in the case of Sri Lanka too. Let me bring up a few areas where we can learn from my African experience. South Africa upskilled the farmers by 10% year on year, which in turn increased the employment on primary agriculture by 14%. This improving on poverty alleviation, and also it adds to boost the country's economy. Ethiopia, which was world's third fastest developing country during the pre-COVID era, has well-developed digitalized hotline and a kind of a one-stop shop for agriculture to create that enabling environment and foster new agri investments on day-to-day affairs. I believe Sri Lanka too can reciprocate this successful model. Chad and Zambia, I noticed that they introduced large seed and cereal banks to buy during high crops and store. And as a result, it has dramatically reduced its reliance on imported food dependency on forex. Senegal, who found the world's cheapest COVID test kit recently, would have seen from the media, is building a groundnut-based agroeconomy occupying 40% of their total arable lands probably which is what is more suitable to them. Irrigation is the main aspect in turning agri-economics, I would say. Let's take one crop like manioc. We call it cassava in Africa. Manioc is growing in my adjoining country, the Senegal, where yield under rainfed is 20 metric tons per hectare. But they are getting 45 metric tons per hectare under rainfed, not under rainfed, but under irrigated conditions. In my sugarcane plantation here in Sierra Leone, we have pivot irrigation system with around 200 pivots in operation, where I am monitoring from my smartphone what is the current soil moisture available, which cane requires more moisture. In fact, the irrigation calendar is fully automated here. What I mean is we should not let weather control us anymore, but by this way we should control the weather and get our crops grown. So current trend here is countries use autonomous tractors such as Tiger, which prepare about around 75 acres plowing a day. Ethiopia is doing foliar spraying with drones. I saw in Angola and Uganda that they are using planes to spray their foliar fertilizers. Artificial intelligence tech is highly used in Ethiopia. You may have heard that Ghana opened an artificial intelligence research center with the support of Google, which Sri Lanka is concentrating currently. Also, I believe COVID-19 has fast-tracked it now. Atula, in a nutshell, we should look at an era where farmer goes on New Year vacation or so, should be able to plow and harrow his land when he gets the alert on his smartphone to say that previous day he has had a good rain, with a kind of autonomous tractor to plant seed using artificial intelligence technology and irrigate his farm on a smartphone. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Subhash. Professor, do we have enough quality seeds and planting material?
This is a very important question, Atula. I think I can bring in some of the interventions that I made in response to your first query as well. As I told you, we are in the Yala season right now. We are fortunate enough to have a certain amount of, adequate quantities of seeds and planting material of good quality so that we can go ahead with the planting in Yala. But we have to focus in Maha. On Maha, if you have to make sure the food production drive and the productivity enhancement drive goes in well. Please do remember, I think everyone will understand that it all depends on the base that you use, base material that you use. That's the seed, that's the planting material to make sure there is high yielding, the required yields are produced, and the required productivity enhancement has taken place. So we should never forget these important aspects. Actually, in our country, the seed production and supply are mainly done by three parties. Mainly by the State Department of Agriculture using its own facilities that is available, the private sector and the farming community themselves. The Government Department of Agriculture and the private sector cannot provide the total seed and planting material requirement, no matter even they start importing them to Sri Lanka. But then farming community, they themselves have their own seed material to follow up cultivation. So this is where the important things to come in, important understanding has to be there. In order to have good quality seeds, Atula, there are several things that has to be fulfilled. One thing is breeding. Breeding comes from the state sector mainly in Sri Lanka, and private sector is also into it. I'm happy to say that there are certain private sector organizations who are going for vegetable breeding in this country, and the government sector is fully into it. And then comes the imports, especially with respect to hybrids. We have success stories about importing hybrids to Sri Lanka. Thanks to this importation of hybrid, our maize cultivation has proliferated. Our production is trying to meet the demand that has been created by the animal production industry, because 85 to 90% of the maize that we produce goes into animal feed. We should never forget that. So the crop sector is also supporting the animal production sector. That's the key synergy that has been there, so that to make sure the food security needs of the people are met. And going further, no matter bringing these things, Atula, if the material that is being brought in or material that is being produced as seed and planting material in Sri Lanka, if they cannot reach the farming community, the practitioners at the correct time and at an affordable price, that's the key. So we have to make sure those mechanisms are established in the future to get the maximum benefit out of the genetic material that we have and genetic material that we have imported. So the distribution system has to be streamlined with the help of the Department of Agrarian Development, with the help of the provincial council systems and the local government systems. And if I take the hybrid seed scenario, Atula, for a while, because the key idea is to have good quality seed and planting material and to see whether we have adequate quantities. Yes, we have adequate quantities of our open pollinated varieties. In the case of rice, we have about 80 recommended varieties that have been developed by our own scientists. High yielding rice varieties which suits many conditions in this country. If there's a biological constraint, we have a variety. If there's an abiotic constraint, we have a variety to be introduced. So we are happy about that. Thanks to Department of Agriculture and other sciences in the country, we have been able to achieve this target. But the situation is not so developed in other crop sectors which we are moving forward right now. Take the hybrid seeds. Again, I'm going back to what I said. Private sector is bringing in the best quality hybrid seed which has been tested by the Department of Agriculture before being released. And the Department of Agriculture themselves have started developing hybrid seeds. We have developed chili hybrids. We have developed maize hybrids very recently. We have developed vegetable hybrids. We have developed hybrids of like bitter gourd and so on. We have developed hybrids of other varieties in this country. So there are enough examples, but the only thing is we have to make sure planting material reaches the end user to make sure the productivity enhancement drive is supported in this country. So that is where the question raised by you becomes important. We are having breakthroughs in development in terms of breeding. But Atula, we need to make sure, we have to make sure in the future that all what we produce will reach the farmers. So seed certification plays a very important role. I kindly request all the private sector also, do not exploit, I'm sure they are not exploiting, do not exploit. We don't need illegal entries of anything coming into Sri Lanka. And I'm also happy to say that universities have also come forward. They are using their farming facilities. They are supporting the Department of Agriculture for the seed production program right now. I know Faculty of Agriculture at University of Peradeniya, they are using their farming facilities to produce seeds, chili seeds, cowpea seeds, ginger seeds to make sure Maha-season cultivation will take place effectively. Even in that limited way, people are moving forward. So the question is extremely important. We have adequate seeds of high quality for certain varieties, but for certain crop species, we need to go further. We have to strengthen the system, which I'll be talking about later in this discussion. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you, Professor. Countries such as Japan speak a lot on immune boosters. Dr. Ilmi, we have cinnamon, moringa, garlic, turmeric, and bees honey. Can we use them?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Atula, for your timely question. With this current pandemic of COVID-19, where there is no effective medicine or vaccine is available, maintaining a healthy immune system is the best, most important weapon we have against the infection. So if you have a functioning immune system, it could fight against bacteria, virus such as COVID-19. Therefore, to maintain functioning immune system, the body needs sufficient amount of vitamins, maybe vitamin A, B, C, D, E, and other nutrients, some micronutrients also, zinc, selenium, iron, copper, etc. While doing the hygienic practices recommended by the health authorities such as hand washing, social distancing, then wearing masks, etc., we can boost our immune system by consuming more fruits, leafy vegetables, green and black tea. We have black tea in Sri Lanka. Then spices like ginger, garlic, turmeric, as you said. And also our traditional herbal-based preparation like porridges we have, and also probiotic food to improve our gut health. So among the few commodities you mentioned, Mr. Atula, the cinnamon, turmeric, moringa, and bee honey have vast potential to expand in cultivations in Sri Lanka. Currently we have some cultivation, but there's a potential to enhance the acreage of cultivation if there's more market opportunities and investment opportunities and more value-added products with proven health benefits. In case of cinnamon, Sri Lanka is the world's largest producer and exporter of pure cinnamon. Sri Lanka claims 90% of the global market share of Cinnamomum seylanicum. That is known as Ceylon cinnamon or true cinnamon. The Ceylon Cylanicum is indigenous to Sri Lanka and the southern part of India. So the Ceylon cinnamon has antimicrobial, antiparasitic, antioxidant, and also free radical scavenging properties. So studies conducted in my institute, ITI, we confirmed that the Ceylon cinnamon lowers blood glucose level. That means good for diabetic patients. It has cholesterol and blood pressure lowering properties as well. So one important difference between the Ceylon cinnamon and the cassia, the other cinnamon available in other countries, is their coumarin content. The coumarin content in Ceylon cinnamon is very low, but the coumarin level in other cinnamon varieties are much higher, and there may be some health risks if consumed in higher quantities for a regular basis. If you consume, there may be some health risks, but in Ceylon cinnamon, we don't have that problem. A group of scientists in my institute, ITI, has developed a capsule from Sri Lankan cinnamon. It's a patented product. It is just not a powdered cinnamon in a coating, in a capsule. It's a dried extract of high quality cinnamon quills, which does not have coumarin traces. So that is not toxic to human, and also it contains mainly procyanidins, which is responsible for blood sugar lowering, and also cholesterol lowering effect, and they have clinically proven using healthy individuals as well as diabetic patients. So this technology is ready to commercialize, and we are seeking a potential investor. So likewise, we have developed many products using Ceylon cinnamon. And when I come to moringa, has been cultivated in Sri Lanka maybe from ancient time, and all parts of moringa tree is edible. Any part we can use in our curries as well as in our food processing activities. However, the recent past, there was a big export demand for moringa leaf powder, and some local companies established large cultivations of moringa basically to obtain only leaves to prepare leaf powder and capsules, like our tea plantations. They maintain the plantation only to take leaves. So other than the spices you mentioned, Mr. Atula, Sri Lanka is rich with many other crops and herbs which can be used as immune boosters. Some of the fruits like citrus fruit, then pineapple, we have world-class, the very good pineapple in Sri Lanka, and also some underutilized fruit varieties like, I will say, the Sinhala name, Madang, Veralu, Gurasa lighting, then different vegetable varieties, leafy greens, and also our traditional porridge made out of leafy greens, and our traditional rice varieties. Most of our traditional rice varieties, they have a lot of properties, immunoboosting properties. Then our virgin coconut oil, it has proven antiviral and antimicrobial properties. There are many immune boosters like that, and also some immune booster new product development also already started in all the universities as well as in institutes like ITI. But I can tell you finally, stick to our daily traditional meals made at home using nutritious local raw materials, which are good for our immune system and protects us from many non-communicable diseases is better rather than going for fast food outlets, but the new generation is used to.
Thank you, Dr. Ilmi. Thank you very much. Bioenergy and modern agriculture, food production are equally sharpened tools for sustainable development. As a person engaged in one of the world's largest biomass to power generation projects, can you make a comment, Subhash?
Yes, Atula. I am sure this is going to be the most important question of the day. Especially after COVID-19 hit the globe, people realize more about their need for protection of nature. Unless otherwise, nature will read us as the virus and destroy us, not the COVID-19. So similarly, unless you ensure food supply despite the current pandemic, there will be a more serious pandemics, including a hunger pandemic. When you look at the rate at which pollution is taking place, in 10 years from now, there will be an irreversible damage done to the environment. If we don't take serious corrective actions, it will sure lead to more serious pandemics. So it is high time to go for environmental friendly farming while producing green and clean energy, ensuring sustainable development. Otherwise, instead of having to improve high tech for farming, we will have to go and produce high-tech oxygen filters or ventilators for our own grandchildren to breathe, I would say. So we produce power out of elephant and napier grass here, coupled with sugarcane bagasse, which is the champion crop in reducing carbon footprint. We also produce around 100 million liters of fuel-grade biofuel per year. Even manioc, which is a gluten-free product, is well grown anywhere in Sri Lanka as well. So manioc can not only help to fight against hunger, it also has a better biofuel yield than all the other crops, which model we can easily replicate in Sri Lanka, provided we get the government to pass the blending mandate to incorporate up to around 20% of biofuels to gasoline, like done in Nigeria, Kenya, Mauritius, in the African continent. So that not only environmental protection, but also it can have a forex substitution. As Sri Lanka imports about 1,200 liters of petrol a year, we can possibly retain 280 million worth of forex only by going for the blending mandate. Sri Lanka should ensure the reuse of waste to generate energy for agriculture industries. I have seen some local governments have embarked on this, but it should be made mandatory. Sri Lanka could waste plastic also to generate power, as done in Singapore, because wherever we go, we see a lot of plastic is thrown away by people. Biomass is another solution to ensure green and clean energy supply, especially during dry season, as hydro yields can go down dramatically during the dry season there. Pragmatically speaking, until we substitute with bioenergies, maybe for next 10 years or so, we will not be able to eradicate non-renewable power supplies totally, but we could ramp it up slowly. As per Kyoto Protocol sign, carbon trading is a great way to combat the issue, as I am sure instead of trading cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin on blockchain platform, there will be a day where the world will replace cryptocurrencies with carbon, methane, sulfur currencies, etc., etc., where polluting nations can buy carbon credits, offset their pollution, so that it will not only cleanse the planet and reverse the damage discussed, but also it will incentivize those who sequestrate carbon, methane, and other pollutants. And it will create more jobs in the industry, thus adding to GDP multiplier effect within the country. I'm sure if we can make a real voice, Sri Lanka become a carbon negative country in 2040 like Bhutan. Atula. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Subhash. Professor, now you are a leading public sector personality. What do you think of the public-private partnership in agriculture, Professor? And what are the possibilities?
Once again, you have got a set of timely questions, Atula. That's the important thing here. Well, let me look at it this way. Feeding the nation is a Herculean task for any government. I mean, that's the prime job of the government. But Atula, just because feeding the nation is the prime objective, that does not mean government have to develop the technology, do marketing, and even to do door-to-door distribution of food. That cannot be done by a government. Government cannot do business, and they should not get involved in business on the other hand. This is where the private sector should come in. And private sector also should not wait standing as a bystander to wait until the government invite them. No, the initiative should come from both ends to make into a very fruitful public-private partnership. So the response to your question, the first thing is, yes, indeed, being from the public sector, being in the university, but working very closely with the state institutions and the private sector institutions and the farming community, my fervent feeling is that there should be more public-private partnership, and they should be target-oriented than resource-oriented. Let me give you two good examples. One good example, Atula, actually, very recently. People have been blaming the Department of Agriculture, saying that though they produce varieties, those varieties, the parent material are not accessible to the private sector and others. But the Department of Agriculture broke this barrier. Very recently, when they produced the chili hybrid, which can yield a potential yield, a resuscitation yield about 60 tons per hectare. I mean, we are getting an average about maximum 10 right now, maximum 10 right now in the field. But forget about the 60, let's say we are getting 25 tons per hectare, and that's a kind of a miracle. And we have achieved that thing right now, the Department of Agriculture. Now, what the Department of Agriculture has done, Atula, they have given the parents of this MICH chili hybrid variety to the private sector. is now the private sector now does produce seeds and do the marketing and make sure people are cultivating this variety in their own fields. So this is a beautiful example for private-public partnership. The second private-public partnership is what I want to bring in is this delivery mechanism that was established by the CWE with the support of a leading private sector organization. Fortunately, I don't think it's good to talk about the names of the private sector organization at this forum, but there are enough classic examples, success stories here in order for us to move forward, Atula. So it's important. And a few things I want to mention right now at this stage. I mean, we have been talking about crop production, food crop production. What about animal feed? What about fodder production, for example? I think this fodder production for the animal industry should also take place through similar private-public partnerships. I think the Department of Agriculture, who has the breeders, capable breeders, in order to go ahead and do grass breeding and so on, whatever, and then to make it their mandatory job as well in the future. You cannot work with the limited number of people who are there right now. Infuse more human resources, make sure this technology being brought forward for the benefit of the animal industry as well. Well, as I told you once again, COVID-19, the initial issue was food distribution, Atula. We all felt that it's not the food production. We were blaming the system, saying that the food supply chain has broken, and COVID-19 was a destroyer. It showed us how quickly the global food supply chain can be dismantled very easily, even in the short run. That is why even Singapore, I read an article very recently, even Singapore now planning well ahead in order to make sure certain level of production, food production take place within the limited available resources that they have. They are looking at vertical farming, for example, right now, Atula. I mean, they've been working towards it. So that's what this COVID-19 has done to us, alarming us, giving us alerts, as I told you earlier. Well, one of the problems, Atula, though we talk high about private-public partnership, I'm sure all private sector are not ready for this. I mean, take the example of this COVID-19 scenario. When the food distribution system was kind of dismantled in this country, even the leading private sector was taken by surprise of what happened. They were not prepared to do this type of large-scale operation. In other words, going further, transport failures were there. There were inadequate storage. There were labor shortages. All those gave a cumulative impact onto this damage in the food distribution chain further. So we have to get together. Private-public partnership should not be on paper. It should be in practice, like the door-to-door delivery mechanism adopted by the CWE. And I'm happy, Atula, Government of Sri Lanka, at least during this crisis situation, they have got different strata of the government powers or machinery or in administration get involved in this food distribution part, at least purchasing and marketing and distribution part. It's difficult to run it in the long run, though we see a success story, at least in the short run. If you want to make sure there's long run investments on this, private sector should take the leadership. Private sector should come in. So Atula, all in all, there is enormous opportunities for private-public partnership, and that will be the way forward in the post-COVID-19 era in the case of agricultural development in this country. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Ilmi, I want to come back to the same topic in a different way. You see, the post-harvest losses, 40% is a huge component. Now, this is a challenge. So you mentioned about it earlier, but I would like to question in a different perspective. How do we overcome this?
Yes. Yeah. This is the question what is very much close to my heart. Post-harvest loss reduction. How to do the post-harvest loss reduction. So the post-harvest loss of a commodity means the losses taken place from time of harvest until the produce reaches the consumer. So the loss assessment studies conducted at the ITIMA Institute and the Institute of Post-Harvest Technology on selected crops like mango, papaya, banana, and some vegetables in Sri Lanka indicated that the losses are about 30 to 40%, as you said, as you mentioned. So we actually these studies have done long time ago, but recently we did for mango and we found the losses are still same. So where we went wrong? So I wanted to give that in here, discuss that in this presentation, actually in this discussion. So to reduce these losses, actually we have to identify where these losses occur and what are the reasons for these losses. So usually these losses can happen each and every point of the supply chain. So in my first talk, I told you that our supply chain is very complex. So because of this complexity, we can happen a lot of physical injuries due to rough handling in different places, and also moisture loss, pest and disease damages, and harvest at incorrect maturity states. So everything can happen, everything can contribute for post-harvest losses. Okay, what is the way forward due to these losses, to reduce these losses? So we have to definitely adhere to proper post-harvest management techniques. So it has to be started from the farm by introducing proper pre-harvest management techniques to get good quality, healthy and safe product. Then only we can guarantee the shelf life of this harvested crop. If you don't have healthy product, if you don't get healthy product from the market, then definitely from the field, then definitely you cannot guarantee the shelf life. And also the farm should comply with good agricultural practices. I already mentioned, then Sri Lankan GAP or Global GAP guidelines, which enable farmers to produce safe product. Also with proper fertilizer management, comply to recommended doses of pesticide, and also pruning and training of plants, maintaining crop sanitation. So you have to do everything in the field to get a good healthy product from the field. Then you have to harvest your crop at the correct stage of maturity. So the R&D institutions in Sri Lanka like ITI and IPHT, we have developed maturity indices for many fruits and vegetables to select the best suitable harvesting time of a crop. But farmer education is very important there. We have to educate the farmer through proper extension service or contract grower system about these indices, maturity indices. Most of our exporters and even supermarkets have their own contract farmer systems, and then they used to educate the farmers about these required specifications. They are doing well because of this extension service. And also we have to strengthen the packing house operations. So we have to facilitate cleaning, sorting and grading of the harvested commodities before it comes to the retail or wholesale market. In present situation, mostly the sorting and grading are mostly practiced in wholesale or retail point, contributing high post-harvest losses at the end. Have to establish packing house facilities close to cultivations, maybe close to farmer units, to facilitate this cleaning, sorting, grading and packing like operations. In Sri Lankan situation, most of the post-harvest loss of perishables take place during transportation. So we do not use proper packaging. Still, we have not changed a lot. So most of the packaging we use serve as a unit of sale, but not to provide a protection to a perishable. Therefore, using suitable packaging material, either plastic, wooden or cardboard boxes, we can preserve the commodity by external damages and reduce losses. So it is important to encourage use plastic crates in transportation. I think one time the government also tried this using plastic, influence to use the plastic crates to our transport agents, but that also didn't work. Anyway, we have to, as a policy decision, this has to introduce again. And also we have to introduce proper transportation system. That is another point we get a lot of losses. And we can use cooling trucks depending on the purpose, or if the cold chain is maintained. For example, if the commodities are intended for export market, either by sea or air, or for highly perishable commodities like strawberry, grapes like things, yes, we can go for cold chain. Otherwise, well-ventilated vehicles with hood or roof is good for transportation. We have to select that type of transportation system. Then the absence of staggered system of cultivation and appropriate storage facilities results, as we mentioned earlier, the seasonal gluts. So there may be price hikes in off-season. So this can be partially overcome by using proper storage facilities. So properly cured good quality onion and potato, we can successfully store in low-cost farm rustic stores, low-cost storages. And yes, When I talk a little bit about the cold chain facilities, the cold storage is this is not only solution. The people think that this is the only solution. Whatever the rubbish, if you put in the cold storage, you can get a good quality thing. So if you need to practice cold storage, always we have to couple it with the cold chain management from the farm to the consumer. We have to think about the optimum suitable temperatures and relative humidities for crops, then maximum storage duration, and also the compatibility of the crops. So we cannot put all the fruits and vegetables in the same cold room. So we have to think about the compatibility, ethylene sensitivity, and there are some commodities which can produce ethylene, some are sensitive to ethylene, and also we have to select the high value crops for cold storage. Otherwise, it will add to the cost. The cold storage cost will add to the final cost. So with the application of all these pre and post harvest management techniques, we have to consider about shortening the complexity of the marketing sequence or supply chain, which I already explained. And hope you may realize that we have to take a multidisciplinary approach to reduce post-harvest losses. So we have to address these issues systematically to reduce the post-harvest losses.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. We seem to be getting a lot of questions coming in. Professor, how about potatoes, dry chilies, big onion, and mung bean? Can we not grow them much more in an economical way?
Right, okay, thank you. Sorry, there was an issue with respect to the sound here. Well, Atula, it's an interesting question actually, because Sri Lanka is harping a lot saying that we are an agricultural economy. But while saying so, quite a significant amount of food is imported to this country. It's nothing, I mean, not to blame the Department of Agriculture or any of the practitioners in this country, but you will understand there are certain reasons why these things have happened. Take the 5 crops that you mentioned a little while ago. Potato, 57% of the requirement of potato is imported to this country. Dry chili, last year, about 99% of the dry chili requirement was brought in mainly from 3% of the food material is imported to this country. If you take red lentils, I think you're talking about dal. I'm sure you are referring to Mysore dal here. 100% of the material is brought into this country imported. And mung bean, about 47% of the crop is imported for consumption. Atula, our land is limited, and productivity is the way out in order to make sure that we can achieve whatever the requirements that we have in this country. It's a difficult task to be done unless technology comes in to help. Productivity enhancement with less input, getting more is a Herculean task, I told you at the beginning. Well, I'm happy to see a lot of people are now joining hands to make sure the government is supported with all the activities, all the technologies that we have. For example, the deans of 8 faculties of agriculture, the Agri.lk Agripreneurs, and the Sri Lanka Institute of Agriculture. Likewise, many other agencies have come up with proposals to see how this productivity enhancement drive can take place, and Sri Lanka can be placed on top of the map with respect to agriculture development in this country. So the things are happening in that case, Atula. So it's important. But also, while saying so, we have to understand that we cannot grow everything everywhere. No way. Subhash quite correctly said that we have to beat the climate, but then we still need that technology in certain cases. We have to beat the climate. When the climate requirement does not match with the crop that we want to grow, then of course we are in trouble. But that's where we need the private sector coming in. That's where we need the scientists, academia, everyone coming together to make sure the technology they are for agriculture. As I told you, we cannot grow crops everywhere. Then what are we to do? We have to grow what we can grow best. Let's grow what we can grow best. That is the issue. Take red lentils, for example, Atula. You were talking about red lentils a little while ago, and 100% of the red lentils are imported. We know that because the commercial cultivation in Sri Lanka has enormous problems. We don't have the correct climate, we don't have the correct types, we don't have the technology here, and more importantly, the many biotic and abiotic stresses hinder any commercial scale cultivation of red lentils in Sri Lanka. People can say we can grow red lentils in pot. Yes, you can, but the economies of scale is a matter. So that's one thing that you have to be very careful. Let's look at potato. Enormous opportunities. Right now, the Department of Agriculture is moving further and trying to use G0 seed production in greenhouses so that they can be practiced in this country. And then about dry chilies, for example. There's a new variety, as I told you earlier, which has brought in a lot of hope. This new variety has brought in a lot of hope to make sure crop can be cultivated, and we sincerely hope in the future with the higher yields, and we can move ahead and make sure dry chili production will be in Sri Lanka. Big onion, of course, there are issues. We are still to meet the seed requirement of big onion in this country, but there we need a lot of technology coming in once again. Drip irrigation, fertigation, protected agriculture environment, and also we cannot have them everywhere in this country. This is once again, there is a need to make sure private sector come into picture. There are well-established, respectable, and private sector with proven technology. That's where we have to invite them to be there to support this overall issue. And finally, the mung bean. Well, mung bean alone is not a profitable crop. Mung bean alone is a failure in most of the cases. But the Department of Agriculture is now trying to be followed by mung bean to make sure with sprinkle irrigation to make sure this crop rotation work well. Well, that is where the modern technology comes in always. But do remember, modern technology is costly. It's not cheap. Modern technology is always costly, and you cannot have cheap modern technology. We should, those things should go out of our mind. When the modern technology costly rates use it, we have to find the investments. And going further, Atula, I see there are certain disturbances coming up, but still we have to understand that precision agriculture is the future. Produce more with less. Nanotechnology will have to come into effect. And Faculty of Agriculture, for example, at Peradeniya are working on biofertilizer. National Institute of Fundamental Studies also working on biofertilizer. Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology is coming up with nanofertilizer, for example. Likewise, precision agricultural technologies is a must. And we have to make sure those things will go ahead and help the development of the agriculture sector. Over to you, Atula.
Thank you, Professor. Subhash, how about smart farming using ICT techniques such as big data, IoT, cloud, and blockchain?
Well, Atula, currently the problems what we predominantly face in between farm to consumer, lack of end-to-end transparency, reliability, complexity, and immense undue delays. This is where the big data, IoT, cloud, blockchain solution has to come in. A while ago, I was talking about the blockchain trading on Forex cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Litecoins. You know, Amazon, Tesla, Google, they trade their stocks on blockchains. There are peer-to-peer platforms. There are many platforms like that. Similarly, the blockchain system has to come into farming fraternity. This is one of the ways to create demand, foster more overseas orders where you would be integrating it across multiple participants such as farmer, the processor, distributor, then retailer, the trader, the bank, the funder, insurance provider, auditor, the consumer to participate in real time in one single platform attached to the product, where end buyers, traders can track down step-by-step process in the agriculture value chain to track products based on geographical indicators and other marketeers to empower consumers to provide a way to encourage and reward good practices. And also it can penalize illegal and unsustainable businesses so that importer will not find difficult to track down the downstream the process. And not only they track down the traceability, but also it is important for their downstream decision making. This will provide solution where all activities will be documented in a kind of, you say, distributed or decentralized ledger. So once trustees' reports, such stakeholders transact among each other and access information in real time. For an example, we have a company here called Sierra Agra. Mr. Koroma sends his mango load to Sierra Agra, who produce fruit juice and pulp. They export to Charles in USA, who also has a packing plant. After packing, he distributes to a third-party distributor via supermarket chain and e-commerce platform and distribute to end consumer. All these steps are done just in a single platform. You won't believe there are about 110 steps being tracked in the system where there is no office. You don't have to pay any office rental, electricity bills, phone bills, lawyers' charges, having to maintain fleet of vehicles, multiple staff, accountants, so on and so forth. But more than 20 smart contracts are automatically signed in real time in between the process. When Mr. Koroma supplies his mangoes to Sierra Agra, factory smart contract will manage the payment to farmer through the bank where purchase orders, delivery notes, good receipt notes, payment vouchers, payment receipts will be created in real time. As you know, farmer wants to get paid as and when he delivers his product without any delay. So they predict this IoT cloud technology will reach a value of up to $550 billion in 2023. So blockchains put together an incorruptible land registration records ledger as well for the farmer and the farm owners. And also it provides immutable record of agriculture supply chain to build consumer trust and loyalty. In the fisheries sector, I would say blockchain can be used to track and deter illegal, unreported, and ungrateful fishing, which poses the greatest threat to marine ecosystem and ultimately to the whole environment. So blockchain IoT is the way forward to high productive network. Thanks to COVID-19, finally, Atula, we all have seen 3 years of digital transformation happen just in 3 months. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you. Thank you. We get a lot of questions coming in from the participants. There is a question, if you can, Professor, if it's possible for us to give a quick answer on this question. It's a popular topic, home gardening. A lot of inquiries are coming about home gardening. Can you tell us very briefly what's your take on this, Professor?
Yes, of course, Atula. I will definitely take this question up. Atula, before that, with your permission, I think I missed a small component in your previous query regarding the e-commerce that you mentioned. Allow me to go ahead very quickly on that. E-commerce has started playing an important role, Atula, in this whole system right now, thanks to COVID-19, which certain things are thought mission impossible came into action within few days. For example, take the e-auction of tea. It took 126 years for bringing the hammer auction conducted by the Colombo Tea Traders Association to go into e-auction just in 5 days. And we had the first e-auction on 4th April. Look at the coconut auction. It went on e-auction after 26 years of existence. Home delivery systems, online marketing systems, the user-friendly platforms, everything has come into effect. So e-commerce is look like the order of the day, but we have to make sure all these things are coupled with freshness, safety, and having less food miles. That's a short answer that I want to give you to add to the previous question, Atul. And let me come back to your question about the home garden. It seems that the audience is also interested in. Atul, home garden programs have been there in Sri Lanka for a longer period of time. I mean, I remember a massive home garden program called Apivamu Ratnagumu, which was launched in 2007. In support of that program, home garden program also proliferated and made sure people move into this home garden, producing their own food to a greater extent. But the system didn't work continuously, Atula. The important thing is we have to move out once again of this concept that home gardens are not to achieve national level food security. It's not that, Atula. Home gardens are good. It was introduced timely, promoted timely at a situation where Sri Lanka was going through a lockdown. Curfew. People were at home and we were having more time to spare on the home gardens. We were having more time to spare on the annual cropping. But actually, if the home garden is to survive in the long run and to sustain, then there should be perennials in the home garden. That's the key to success because you need less attention and definitely it gives production. Only issue is that perennials will not give a quick result. You have to wait for some time period. We know how long it will take for a jackfruit plant to produce a fruit at the end. So those kind of things we have to bear. But one thing beauty about home garden is that home gardens, as I told you, not to support, it can support of course, but not to achieve national level food security. But home gardens will definitely help you to have certain components for a balanced diet, nutritious diet, safe food, as Ilmi was talking about little while ago. That is where the success story is, but not thinking of commercialization and try to provide going back in the system that we shared material from one house to other. It's good. It's a nice system, bring people together. But when you look at the overall country's food security, home garden will have a minor component, minor contribution, still a contribution, but more importantly, it will support your meal. It will support a balanced diet, as I told you a little while ago. To repeat once again, it will provide you with safe food and also make sure food in need is available at your vicinity to a certain extent. Well, annuals, Atula, remember, needs continuous attention. More and more animals you bring in, you definitely have to make sure those are resistant or resilient to climate vagaries. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. I think Atula was talking about smart agriculture a little while ago, but still the important point is these annual crops are going to be extremely sensitive. So without trying to mess up the home garden in the long run, make sure it is rich with perennials. It's rich with perennial fruits, for example. It mixes with perennial vegetables like Sesbania, we call it Khaturumurunga in Sinhala. Those are the advantages and those are the plus points that we can get out of a home gardening system. Definitely, it has aroused lot of interest, Atula, and people started loving agriculture. There is affection towards agriculture and there's a drive toward agriculture thanks to the home gardening program. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, I'm giving another connected question. Nucleus farming in Sri Lanka. Can you comment on that, Professor?
Atula, this is an interesting question. I hope it's coming from many people in the audience as well. There's no good examples to bring in from Sri Lanka about nucleus farming. We have quite a good experience about contract growers, Atula. We are public sector and private sector getting involved in large group of farm families, farming, try to get the input done from them and make sure processing facilities and the production facilities, the value addition take place in somewhere else. But nucleus farming has a different meaning. By definition, you have a central processing unit surrounded by the farming community, especially smallholders, which provides the inputs to make sure the processing unit is sustained. On the other hand, the processing unit, that enterprise also has a small farm to make sure the gap filling exercise take place in the case of supply of raw materials. But what I see in Sri Lanka is, rather than talking about nucleus farming, I think there should be a modified nucleus farming. Not only small scale farmers, but the large scale players also come into picture. So there's a coherence in this whole system. And I'm happy to inform you that there's an agriculture modernization project sponsored by the World Bank, run by the Ministry of Agriculture. And they are going through something called agriculture technology demonstration parks. Although they are called parks, they are actually villages, Atula. So in those villages, what they are trying to implement is something similar to this nucleus farming. But one important thing, I'm confident and I'm hopeful that the private sector infusion will come in timely with respect to these ATDPs as well in the future. I know that the Ministry of Agriculture is working toward that. I think the private sector involvement should be more in, because that is the place where technology will come in. The technology infusion take place, and that's the place where marketing is facilitated. So let's get this concept of nucleus farming on board. It's good, but it has to be worked out in such a way where the small scale and large scale farming community are also involved in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Food safety management, especially during post-COVID period. Dr. Ilmi, can you comment briefly on this?
Yes, actually food safety management, not because of the COVID, food safety management has become an essential part of any food industry, as today's consumer is more conscious about safe food. Food hazards, including microbiological, physical, and chemical contaminants, can enter into food supply chain at any point from farm to table. So most of this hazard cannot detect in the food when it is purchased or consumed. That is the dangers behind it, because we cannot see whether it is contaminated. Once you sick only, you realize that your food consumed was contaminated. So foodborne illnesses can transmit from contaminated food to people, making them sick and even cause death depending on the severity of the microorganisms present on this food. Therefore, food processing industries should follow food safety management systems such as GMP, good manufacturing practices, GHP, good hygienic practices, then HACCP, hazard analysis for critical control points, and also ISO 22000 like standards to control food safety hazards and to minimize the risk throughout the food process and to ensure regulatory compliances. So even though most of lockdown at the homes due to COVID pandemic, the essential services like agri-farming, food processing and food distribution systems continued their service without closing. So many consumers have worried that whether the food they are getting is safe or not. So according to the WHO guidelines, it is highly unlikely that people can get COVID-19 from food, because coronavirus cannot multiply in food and they need animal or human host to multiply. However, it is possible to someone get infected by touching the contaminated surfaces such as table, doorknobs, stainless steel, glass, oven, the plastic, and also some machineries like surfaces. So it is important to identify high touch points in your food processing facility and also wholesale retail outlets, and frequent sanitizing of such places using suitable sanitizer is advised by the WHO. So if any food processing companies already complied with food safety standards, they need to reinforce personal hygiene measures. They have to give another training for their people, their workers, about the cross-contamination, how to reduce contamination of packaging with contaminated workers, and also hand washing, etc. The companies, the food processing companies who do not comply with quality management systems, which I told you before, they have to adhere to strict personal hygiene and personal premises hygiene guidelines. So it is important to have close monitoring systems to check whether the workers properly use protective equipment such as gloves, masks, head covers, like protective equipments, and also importantly physical distancing. So personnel involved in the food distribution system also need to be aware about the hygienic practices and need to ensure all transportation containers and they should keep them clean and also frequently disinfected. And also food must be protected from contamination and must be separated from other goods that are already contaminated. And it is important to maintain good hygienic practices around open food displays. We have a lot of open food displays like fresh produce displays, bakery products. So once you bring your fresh fruit and vegetable to home, need to wash properly with potable running water before consumption because of this COVID pandemic. And also unwrapped bakery products should not openly display or sell. Bakery products on open or self-service displays in retail stores should be placed in a plastic or cellophane paper or packaging. And where loose bakery products are displayed in retail stores, these should be placed in cabinets, hot cabinets like places. Once you bring your bakery products to your home, you can preheat in your oven to get rid of some microbial contaminations. Since this is a global pandemic, I think we have to live with COVID for a considerable period of time. Therefore, frequent close monitoring of food outlets, food processing facilities by health authorities to check whether they comply with quality management and other hygienic practices is very much important.
Thank you, Doctor. I would like to kindly request the audience to allow us to continue for 10 to 15 minutes more, because there are a lot of questions. I'm trying to reduce and ask only about 2 or 3 questions and close the session. So may I seek your permission to continue for the next 10 to 15 minutes? Just a question from Mrs. Williams from Hertfordshire, UK. I think this is connected to, it should be referred to Dr. Ilmi. It's the same subject you were talking about. If any food produce is exported to Europe, what assurance is granted by a local governing body to the importer that the produce is safe from any harmful addition of chemicals and preservatives? What is the sort of guarantee certification we can give, Doctor?
Yes. Actually, in the good question, because we used to export a lot of commodities from Sri Lanka. So we have accredited laboratories in Sri Lanka, like Industrial Technology Institute, then Ministry of Agriculture, we have accredited laboratory, and also Sri Lankan Standard Institution. So you can get like a pesticide residue analysis certificate if you are you have suspicious about there's pesticide residuals remaining in your food. Otherwise, there are a lot of standards to comply. There are a lot of accredited laboratory tests, all the testing parameters like whether if they have used food grade packaging materials, then the nutrition content, and also shelf life. A lot of people ask whether it is the shelf life is scientifically guaranteed. So in Sri Lanka, we have all these facilities, and we can give like harmonized test reports. The other countries accept our test report because our laboratories are accredited. Sri Lankan laboratories are accredited and highly accepted by the international communities.
Thank you. Professor, another quick question from the audience. One, Dr. Yamato from Tokyo wants to know whether we have know-how available in Sri Lanka for hydroponic farming.
Atula, yes, there are a lot of people, the state sector and the private sector, they have been working on hydroponics for quite a long period of time. So there is adequate information available, but technological upgrades can take place at any given time. But since I don't have all the information right now with me, I'm telling you with confidence that technology is available in Sri Lanka. There are people, private sector and the government sector who have been working on it. If the relevant information is required, I can definitely send it to you, Atula, so that you can forward to the relevant authorities, relevant personnel who are interested in this information, so that the relevant people from Sri Lanka can be contacted in such a way to go ahead with this activity. Thank you, Atula.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. And I will come to last two questions. Subhash, how can we improve on last mile delivery? Any opportunity for investment?
Atula, well, it's a very timely question. You know that the last mile is becoming the biggest mile, especially during the after COVID period, because last mile cost is the highest cost. I would say it will cost more than 20% of the whole food distribution channel. It's so complex and complicated. So timely delivery, quality assurance is a must, because consumer experiences are the cornerstones of the success of the last time delivery, I would say. So it is high time the shippers need to revolutionize their final mile delivery, ensuring credible, timely, seamless delivery. So why cost is high? We have to look at due to large used to deliver. Some vehicles belong to another shipper, goes with excess loads, while other vehicle goes one way or way back with empty load. You know, agric.lk also you were mentioning, and they also has proposed to set up a kind of a national steering committee along with designing a NADP, a National Agriculture Development Plan, not for next 3 years or 5 years, but for next 10 years with the participation of government and private sector, as Professor Marambe mentioned. As highlighted in my previous answer also, it can be 50% private public seed producers span across diverse areas, including livestock, fisheries, and they can take a consensus and take collective decisions. You know, such as maintaining hub of trucks, vans, bikes, and synchronized delivery via IoT cloud technology via truck driver, or the biker will be directed to the delivery point from the Google Earth or another map. It is no secret that 30% of the customers willing to pay a premium price for rely on increase profit has trickle down effect to consumer and to further improve high tech, which can then create much better solutions for the consumers. So we have seen drone delivery of herbal medicines. They are doing currently the delivery of medicines, so it can be applied to Sri Lanka to deliver herbal medicines. That's what I wanted to highlight, and food stuff, books, so on and so forth should be eminent. So Ghana, for that matter, one of my adjoining countries, runs around 600 drones on delivery daily. By acting now on, we all can build more resilient last mile delivery system. Let us capitalize on the pandemic and go for more and more systemization. Finally, the biggest thing Sri Lanka can learn is that from Africa, what I admire, they basically admire each other and they are so compassionate. You know, Uber did not kill the taxi business, but gave more business to taxis. eBay, Amazon did the same. So in Sri Lanka too, best way to cheer yourself is to cheer someone else up, they say. Let us develop together. There are thousands of opportunities out there for everyone. We should use the crisis as a great opportunity bestowed upon us to build more robust and smart agriculture and resilient food supply chain. I think no country has ever faced a real recession or a hunger pandemic if you are self-sufficient in your food and its supply chain. So let us explore all our synergies and work towards it. I'm sure Sri Lanka, with the current leadership team and the set of brains available, can be the first in the world to achieve it, Atula. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'm not going to ask any more questions, but I want to get permission from you, Dr. Ilmi. There are some members from the audience. They want to know about the preservation of fruits and vegetables. So at this moment of time, I will not ask you to go into elaborate details, but instead, can I have your permission to give your contact details to these ladies and gentlemen who are asking this question to get in touch with you? May I have your permission?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. So we will give you the contact details of your organization, ITI, that is Industrial Technology Institute, and we will give your personal contact details as well with your permission. Thank you very much, members of the panel, and ladies and gentlemen, all the participants. Senior Professor Buddhi Marame, thank you, Professor, for your visionary leadership and mature advice. We also it's a pleasure for us to know that you did your doctorate at Hiroshima University, Japan. Jessica being an organization connected with Japanese Ministry of Trade and Industry, and we are pleased to know that you have been a Japanese scholar at some stage. Then Dr. Ilmi Hewajulige, thank you for your competence and for incorporating your technical expertise when contributing. We understand you also did your postgraduate research with the National Food Research Institute, Japan. Mr. Subhash Abeyvikrama, thank you for sharing your African exposure and being very futuristic. I'm sure your exposure at the Harvard University, following a program of entrepreneurship and emerging economies for 2 years, that would have certainly helped you to contribute towards our futuristic approach. Then let me also, I would like to thank Mr. Anuruddha Gamage, Chairman of the Jessica Institute of Management. This is your brainchild, Anuruddha, and for your leadership in conceptualizing this webinar, we congratulate you. Chetana Kathugoda, for your ICT expertise in producing the program without any flaws whatsoever. Thank you very much. Ms. Shami Vidya Vikrama, for all the back office support and arrangements and responding to our request so speedily. Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge with deep gratitude the support given to me by Mr. Rizvi Zahid and Mr. Chandi Dairatna to fine-tune some of the inputs. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for participating at this webinar from different time zones, from various parts of the world. We had participants from the United Kingdom, Ireland, India, Singapore, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Japan, and Australia. Thank you, and we look forward to meeting you again. Thank you very much.